They flooded my workshop, so I shut off the water to their country club say that fast. And it sounds petty, like something from a middle school grudge, but I promise you, it didn't feel petty standing ankle deep in brown water and watching 10 years of my life rust in real time. The worst part wasn't even the loss of tools. It was the way they told me it didn't matter, like I was a pothole on someone else's driveway. I live just outside a gated place called Briar Glen Estates, about 40 minutes north of Charlotte. Big stone entrance hedges trimmed like military stripes, a golf course wrapped around everything like a green ribbon. I don't live inside the gates. My family's been on this land since the 70s, before developers had blueprints and promises and a guy in a blazer to hand them out. My dad built the shop himself, cedar walls, tin roof, wide double doors that opened to the pasture. That's where I learned to square a board, sharpen a chisel fix, what other people call trash. That's where I belonged. A few months back, I walked out early one morning and caught a smell: wet wood, sour and heavy, like old bread left out too long. I figured maybe I'd left a window cracked during one of those sideways summer storms. It happens. But when I pushed open the door, the bottom of it dragged, and then my boot sank. Not a puddle, not a trickle, but standing water across the entire floor. My table saw was half submerged, the cast iron already blooming orange hand planes floating in a tipped tote. Boards I'd been curing for a custom table were swollen like they'd given up. You ever have your brain refuse to catch up with your eyes? That was me. I stood there listening to the soft lapping, the tiny slap of water against metal legs, thinking maybe this is a mistake, this is tiny, it will be fine. It wasn't. It took me 2 days to pump it out. Walt, my neighbor, came over with a sump pump and a six-pack and didn't say much, just shook his head. When the floor finally dried enough to walk on, the damage was clear: thousands in tools, months of work gone. At first I blamed bad luck. Maybe an underground pipe burst. Maybe the creek behind the property had overflowed, so I walked the perimeter following how the land sloped. That's when I saw the ditch. Fresh-cut soil, loose and red, like someone had just taken a knife and scored the earth. It ran from the storm culvert behind Briar Glen's 12th fairway straight down the incline and emptied conveniently into the low spot behind my shop. I touched the dirt, still soft. This wasn't erosion. It was deliberate. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I build cabinets, not theories, but the angle of that trench pointed at my building like an arrow, and my stomach did this little twist. I made calls. County office, water management, a guy I know who does grading. Over the next week, what I pieced together made everything less accidental. Briar Glen had drainage issues on the back 9 rains, pooling near green, slow play, pissed-off members. The HOA approved a runoff optimization, bureaucrat speak for let's move the water someplace else. And someplace else apparently was the lowest adjacent property, mine. I called the HOA president, a retired banker named Russell, always tidy in a polo even on weekends. We'd barely spoken before. I tried to keep my voice steady. Did your board approve a drainage change that directs water onto my land? Papers shuffled. A pause. It's within community guidelines, he said. You're not part of the community. Another pause. It's stormwater, Nathan. It's natural runoff. You'll be fine. I looked back at my warped beams, at my dad's old lathe sitting there like it had aged 10 years overnight. It cost me everything in that building, I said. He sighed like I'd inconvenienced him. Water flows downhill, he said. That's not our fault. Water does flow downhill, sure, but trenches don't dig themselves. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. For days I paced like a dog that can't find the fence line, angry, embarrassed, like maybe I should have seen it coming. Then I thought about the pond that straddles our property line, the one my dad used to fish in with me on Sunday mornings. Decades ago, the developers asked to draw irrigation water from it. Back then, it was a handshake deal. My dad trusted people, no paperwork, just neighborly goodwill. Standing there with my shop gone, I wondered something I should have thought of sooner: who actually owned that pond? That night, I pulled out old surveys my dad kept in a metal filing cabinet, spread the maps on the kitchen table, traced boundary lines with my finger. About 70% of that pond sat on my land. The pump house sat entirely on my side. I read about easements and water rights until my coffee went cold. By the end of the week, the county confirmed it. No recorded easement, no formal agreement, just an old handshake. The next morning, I drove out to the pond. The pump house was a little cinder block box near the water beige paint, peeling the pump, humming like it always had. I ran my hand along the metal door and felt something colder than anger. If water flows downhill, I thought, then leverage does too. I went to the hardware store and bought the heaviest steel lock they had. I didn't sleep much the night before I put it on, not because I wasn't sure, but because once I clicked that lock, there'd be no going back to polite nods. Early, with the sky still thin, I sat in the truck drinking coffee and stared at the pond mist, thinking of my dad and the smell of cedar shavings. For a second, I hesitated. He would have told me to think it through. But I pictured the warped saw, the floating planes, the way Russell had said, "You'll be fine." The hesitation burned off. The pump house latch had no lock, just assumption. I slid the shackle through, snapped it, and listened to the click echo inside that cinder block box. It sounded final, like a sentence. I didn't cut power, didn't damage a wire, I just denied access to a structure sitting on my property. Went back home and started cleaning whatever might be salvageable. Mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "This is Russell Davenport." Of course, their ground supervisor told me the irrigation wasn't drawing water. "There's a lock on the pump house," he said. I didn't pretend. "Correct." I said, oil on my hands. "I secured a building on my land." "You're interfering with essential infrastructure," he said. "I'm securing my property," I said. "My workshop is my livelihood." He told me not to escalate. I actually laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because of the word, like I was the one who dug a trench. "You redirected drainage onto my property and flooded my building. That was escalation," I told him. He told me stormwater management is complex and to submit a formal grievance. I told him I'd submit an invoice. They noticed fast. First, the sprinklers didn't run. Not many noticed at day 1, late spring, still holding some moisture, but by day 3, the fairways showed faint yellowing. Members murmured. "You shut him off, didn't you?" someone asked Walt on the porch. "Yep," he said. "That's bold," the man whistled. "They flooded my shop," Walt said. "I know," he replied. "I hope you got a lawyer." I did. Carla, a local land use attorney who'd helped me once before with stupid zoning questions. She read my stack of surveys and photos and estimates and didn't flinch. "No easement," she said. "If the pump house is on your parcel, you have every right to control access." I asked about prescriptive rights, continuous hostile use, and she smiled that half-smile lawyers have. "They'd have to prove consent wasn't given," she said. "A handshake isn't surrendering ownership." They pushed back like the force of nature. Letters arrived cease and desist, heavy legal language demanding immediate restoration and threatening damages. I slid the paper across the table to Carla. She told me to respond calmly. I sent one photo-laden invoice that listed the damage the replacement cost 10 years of their irrigation draw calculated at commercial rates and demanded remediation of that drainage ditch. The number at the bottom wasn't small. Russell called and called it extortion. "You're attempting to leverage an unrelated issue," he said. "Unrelated?" I asked. "Your ditch sent water into my building." "That was storm water," he said. "Your sprinklers run on pond water." The silence after that was heavy. "We will not pay a fabricated retroactive fee," he said. "Then I won't grant retroactive access," I replied. "You're harming dozens of homeowners who have nothing to do with this." He wasn't entirely wrong. There were families in those houses who didn't sit on the board, but they paid dues that funded those decisions. I didn't vote to drown my own property either. They tried workarounds, rationing pumps running at odd hours, drilling a temporary well that didn't produce yield. I made another move. I lowered the pond level, not to be dramatic, just back to the creek-fed baseline. For years, they'd kept it elevated to ensure strong pump pressure. I adjusted the outflow gate and let it settle. The effect was immediate. Even if they pried the pump house open, there wouldn't be enough volume for full irrigation. Then the water trucks showed up, stainless tankers rumbling through their manicured gates, hoses like veins across cart paths. The optics were deliciously awkward members in polos, standing with arms crossed as hired drivers sprayed what used to be free. Walt texted me a photo one afternoon. "Guess paradise needs a refill." There was satisfaction in that moment, not joy, more like balance restoring itself. But there were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd gone too far, thinking of how my dad would have handled it. He believed in handshakes and neighborliness, but he also believed in protecting what's yours. The turning point was an emergency HOA meeting they invited me to. I almost didn't go. Carla insisted. The clubhouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner framed tournament photos glaring down. Russell stood front and center, jaw tight. When they opened the floor, he introduced me like a curiosity. I stood slowly, every eye on me, and said, "I don't have concerns. I have damage." I passed around the photos, not dramatic, just factual. A woman asked why adjacent owners weren't informed. Russell said the project complied with regs. "That's not what she asked," I said. The room got quieter. Someone asked if the pump house was on my land. Russell hemmed. The structure predated current interpretations. Fancy talk for yes. By the end of that meeting, things shifted. Not fully to my side, but away from blind loyalty. Members grumbled about hauling water costs and canceled events. 3 months of trucking water humbled people. When they offered to fund reconstruction like charity, the language felt off. I wanted replacement value, corrected drainage, and a formal lease for the pond if they wanted to keep using it. 25 years annual payment, upfront clear access terms. Miss a payment, access revoked. You'd think I was asking them to sign their leverage away. Maybe I was. They talked in the hallway. I could see them arguing behind the glass. I felt a strange calm. I thought about the old lathe, about the cedar smell in the mornings, about the steadiness I used to have walking into that shop. "I'm ready," I told Carla. They came back and said they agreed in principle. It took a month, engineers, contractors, insurance adjusters poking around, but eventually construction started. Watching them tear down the old shop felt strange, like watching a history you loved being dismantled. But that version had been compromised the moment water soaked the foundation. The new shop went up on treated lumber, reinforced concrete, proper grading, French drains, sump backups, things I'd never thought I'd need. They replaced every major tool, a new table saw, a lathe that hummed smoother than the old one, planers and joiners' hand tools that smelled of factory oil. The first morning I walked into the finished shop. Light poured in and hit the workbench just right. The air smelled like fresh-cut cedar again, and I stood there longer than I expected, not because I'd won, but because something had shifted. Later at the signing, the pump house now had 2 locks, mine and theirs. Access by schedule, usage capped, everything documented. No more handshakes. Briar Glen's irrigation came back online slowly. Water trucks stopped. The online complaints faded. Drive by today and you'd never know anything happened. Perfect greens carts gliding like nothing went wrong, but I know. Every time I run my hand across that new table saw, I remember standing ankle deep in dirty water and being told it was just storm water. I remember being dismissed. I remember the click of that lock. Russell and I don't talk much. When we do, it's polite nods and short sentences, not friendship, not hostility, just awareness. A few homeowners stopped by later, some apologized quietly. A couple admitted they'd never known about the drainage change until the meeting. One man thanked me and said the whole ordeal forced the board to be more transparent. I don't know if that's true. HOAs have long memories and short tempers, but power doesn't always look like shouting or lawsuits. Sometimes power looks like reading your own property survey at 2 a.m, knowing the lines that matter and deciding you won't let someone redraw them because it's convenient. Would my dad have handled it differently? Maybe. He'd have preferred a handshake. But he also taught me to take care of what's yours, to protect your work, to stand steady when someone bigger tries to lean on you. I didn't sabotage anything. I stopped giving away something that was mine, especially after they decided my loss was acceptable collateral damage. So here's the question I keep circling back to, and I'm genuinely curious what you think. Was I justified? Was that fair balance, or did pride push it too far? If you were standing in my boots watching your livelihood rust because someone wanted greener grass, would you have locked that pump house or tried another way? Tell me what you'd do. Tell me where the line is between justice and revenge. And if you've ever been pushed like that by neighbors, share that story. I read more than you probably expect, and I want to know where people land on this neighborly standing up or a grudge that went too long.